In the silence of your separation, in the void where you thought God had forgotten you, he's not absent. He's working behind the scenes. There's a process, a divine purpose in the pause, and a powerful plan unfolding that you may not even understand right now. You see, there's a testing that happens when you're not in contact with him, and there's a making that happens on the other side. Let me break it down for you today. God is always working behind the scenes, orchestrating a divine plan that's far greater than anything we can see or comprehend. Often we find ourselves in seasons where it feels like everything is on pause and the silence seems deafening. But in these moments, when you feel isolated and disconnected, God is actually preparing you for something bigger than you can imagine. You see, the absence of clear answers, the lack of visible progress, the times when you feel stuck, these are not signs that God is absent or that he's forgotten you. They are signals that God is preparing you for your next level. We often mistake preparation for inactivity. We believe that if God were truly working, we'd see immediate results or hear clear instructions. But God's preparation often doesn't look the way we expect. It's not flashy, and it's not always easy. It's a process of refining and reshaping you from the inside out. When he is preparing you for your next level, he's not just increasing your external circumstances, he's deepening your internal strength. He's dealing with the things that no one else can see, the attitudes, the mindsets, the insecurities, and the heart issues that could hold you back from walking into the fullness of your purpose. Think about a diamond being shaped. It's not a smooth and effortless process. A diamond starts as a rough stone, and it has to endure pressure, intense heat, and grinding before it can shine. If the diamond resists the process, or if the pressure is removed too soon, it never reaches its full potential. The same is true for you. God uses the pressures and challenges in your life to shape your character, to purify your heart, and to position you to carry the weight of the blessings that are coming your way. It's in the waiting that your faith is stretched, your trust is deepened, and your reliance on God is strengthened. When you're going through a season of silence or testing, it's tempting to think that God isn't aware of your situation or that he's forgotten about you. But this is far from the truth. God's silence is not absence. It's simply his way of preparing you for what's ahead. You see, he can't give you what he has for you until you are ready to handle it. The promises he has for you are too great to be handled by someone who isn't fully developed, someone who isn't fully equipped to carry the weight of the blessing. So in the silence, God is doing a deep work inside of you. During these times, God may be teaching you patience, helping you develop endurance, or strengthening your resolve. He may be helping you overcome past hurts and letting go of old mindsets that could hinder your growth. While it may seem like nothing is happening, he is doing more than you can imagine. He is preparing you for your next level. You are being refined for a purpose that will stretch you and transform you into a person who is capable of carrying the destiny he has planned for you. Trust the process, even when it's hard. Trust that God knows exactly what he's doing and that he's preparing you to handle the next level with grace, wisdom, and strength. Keep pressing forward. Even when you don't see the end result yet, your next level is closer than you think. And when you walk into it, you will realize that everything you've been through was God's way of getting you ready. There are moments in our lives when God is silent, when the answers we've been waiting for seem far away, and when the direction we need is unclear. In these times, it's easy to feel abandoned, forgotten, or even forsaken. We start to question God's presence in our lives and wonder why he isn't speaking. Yet in the silence, God is often testing us in the most profound way. The test is this: will you trust him without a word? Will you have faith in his goodness, even when you don't hear his voice or see his hand at work? Trusting God without a word requires a faith that goes beyond emotions and circumstances. It's easy to trust when everything is going well, when the path is clear and the promises are being fulfilled. But real trust, the kind that stretches your spirit, is built in the silence. It's in these moments when you can't hear God's voice and can't see his hand moving that your trust is being refined. Will you believe that he is working even when you can't see it? Will you still declare that he is faithful even when you don't feel his presence? That is the heart of the test. You see, God doesn't test us to fail us. He tests us to build us, to grow us into a deeper relationship with him. Faith isn't just about believing in the good times. It's about believing when the storm is raging and the answer isn't coming. It's about holding on to the truth of who God is, even when everything around you seems to contradict it. That's when trust becomes real. Trust isn't just a feeling, it's a decision, a choice to remain faithful to God, even when you're in the dark. It's saying, I will follow you, even when I can't see the way. In the silence, God is asking us to go deeper. When we can't hear his voice, it's often because he's inviting us to lean into him in a way that doesn't rely on external circumstances. He wants us to trust him with the unseen, to believe that he is working even when our senses don't perceive it. This kind of trust doesn't come naturally. It's forged through time, through experience, and through the testing of our hearts. The more we trust him in the silence, the more we learn to rely on his character rather than our circumstances. The testing of your faith isn't meant to break you. It's meant to build you up. God is not absent during your waiting. He is actively shaping your heart, teaching you to trust his timing and his plan. In the absence of clear direction, we often become impatient or anxious, but this is exactly where God is growing us. He's teaching us to walk by faith and not by sight, to trust that his plans for us are good, even when the way forward isn't immediately visible. When you can trust God without a word, when you can stand firm even in the silence, you're walking in a faith that will sustain you through any trial. The test is hard, but the reward is worth it. Because when you come through this season of waiting, your trust will have been deepened and your relationship with God will be stronger than ever. So ask yourself, can you trust God even when he's silent? If you can, you're passing the test and you're growing into the person he's called you to be. The wilderness is often viewed as a place of hardship, discomfort, and isolation. It's the place where everything you've known is stripped away and you're left facing the unknown, relying solely on God for direction. It's easy to question why God allows us to go through such barren, desolate places. Yet the wilderness is not just a time of struggle, it is a divine preparation for the promise that God has set aside for you. In the wilderness, God is preparing you for the great things he has ahead. Just like the Israelites had to endure their journey through the desert before entering the promised land, you too are being shaped in ways you can't fully understand. The wilderness may feel like a place where nothing grows, but it's actually where God is growing you. He's molding your character, refining your faith, and teaching you lessons that can only be learned in the most difficult of circumstances. If God simply handed you the promise without this preparation, you wouldn't be able to handle the weight of the blessing or the responsibility that comes with it. The wilderness is a place of purification. It's where you are separated from distractions, from the comforts of everyday life, and from the things that can keep you from fully depending on God. It's a season where God works on your heart, removes the things that are not aligned with his will, and refines your spirit so that you can walk into the fullness of his promises. When you're in the wilderness, there's nowhere to turn but to God. It's in those moments of isolation that you learn to lean on him, to trust in his provision, and to hear his voice more clearly than ever before. This is the preparation that you need to fulfill the calling and destiny he has placed on your life. Moreover, the wilderness teaches you endurance. The journey is often long and challenging, and there will be times when you feel like giving up. But these trials are not meant to break you. They are meant to build resilience in your spirit. They teach you to persevere, to trust that God is faithful, and to believe that the promise is still on the way, even when it seems delayed. It's easy to lose hope when you're in the wilderness, but it's precisely in these moments that your faith is tested and strengthened. Every step you take through the wilderness is a step closer to the promise God has for you. One of the most significant lessons learned in the wilderness is patience. You are forced to wait on God's timing. The promise is there, but it's not yet time to walk into it. Waiting in the wilderness is an act of faith in itself. It teaches you that God's timing is perfect and that he is working even when you can't see it. Just as the Israelites had to wait for the right moment to enter the promised land, you too must wait for God to reveal the right timing for your breakthrough. In the waiting, you learn that God is always on time, even if it doesn't align with your expectations. The wilderness also reminds you that God is your provider. In the desert, when there's nothing else to rely on, God shows up. He provided manna for the Israelites, water from the rock, and guidance through the cloud by day and fire by night. When you're in the wilderness, you are forced to trust God for every need, and it's there that you see his faithfulness like never before. The promises may seem distant, but God is faithfully meeting your needs in ways that build your trust in him. So as you walk through your wilderness season, know that it is not a punishment but a process. It's a place where God is preparing you for the promises he has in store. It's where your faith is strengthened, your character is refined, and your dependence on God deepens. The wilderness may be difficult, but it is necessary for the fulfillment of your destiny. Trust that God is working in you, even in the silence, and know that the promise is closer than you think. The wilderness prepares you to step into the fullness of all God has for you. When you're going through trials and challenges, it's easy to get discouraged. The pressure of the situation, the weight of the struggle, and the uncertainty of the outcome can make you feel as though you're sinking. You may even wonder if God has forgotten you or if this season of difficulty will ever end. But in reality, your breakthrough is often hidden in your test. The very thing you're fighting through is what is preparing you for the victory you've been praying for. It's important to understand that every test, every trial, and every obstacle that comes your way has a purpose. They are not random. They are divinely orchestrated moments that serve to strengthen your faith, refine your character, and prepare you for the blessing on the other side. While it may feel like you're in the middle of a storm, God is using this very moment to work in you and through you in ways you can't yet comprehend. The breakthrough doesn't always come in the form we expect. We often look for a dramatic shift, a clear answer, or a miraculous event. But breakthrough is not always about a sudden change in circumstances. Sometimes the breakthrough happens in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit before it manifests in the physical realm. As you go through the test, God is transforming you. He's shaping you into the person who is strong enough to handle the promise. Without this process, you wouldn't be ready to carry the weight of the blessing he has prepared for you. In fact, it's often in the hardest moments that the deepest transformation occurs. You may feel weak, but God is working behind the scenes, turning your weakness into strength. When you feel like you can't go any further, you're actually being stretched, tested, and refined. Every time you choose to keep going, to keep trusting God in the face of adversity, you are growing. Each challenge is developing in you the perseverance, resilience, and patience necessary for what's ahead. If you quit too soon, if you give up when the test is hard, you might miss out on the breakthrough that God has been preparing for you all along. God is not just interested in getting you through the test, he's interested in getting you to a place where you can sustain the victory. A breakthrough achieved without growth may not be lasting. It's in the test that your faith is tested and strengthened. It's in the test that you learn to rely on God and trust that he will provide, even when the situation looks bleak. It's in the test that you learn to stand firm, to fight the good fight, and to know that God is with you every step of the way. So if you're in the midst of a test right now, don't be discouraged. Understand that the breakthrough you're seeking is often hidden in the very thing you're struggling with. The breakthrough is in the lesson you're learning, the strength you're building, and the faith you're developing. Trust that God is working all things together for your good, even when you can't see the outcome. Your breakthrough is on the way, and it's closer than you think. The test is not the end, it's the preparation for the victory that lies ahead. Keep going, keep believing, and keep trusting, because the breakthrough is hidden in the test. And God is preparing you for a glory that will far exceed anything you've imagined. There are moments in life when you feel like you've been waiting forever for the breakthrough, the promotion, the relationship, or the opportunity. You've prayed, you've fasted, and you've believed, but the answer still hasn't come. The waiting can feel unbearable, and it's easy to become frustrated or discouraged. You may even start to wonder if God has forgotten about you or if you're not worthy of the blessing you're asking for. But in reality, God knows exactly when you're ready. He's not delaying your blessing to punish you. He's waiting for the perfect time when you are fully prepared to receive all that he has for you. God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't match up with our expectations. It's easy to want things on our terms and our timing and according to our plans, but God sees the big picture. He knows what you need and when you need it. More importantly, He knows what you need to become in order to sustain the blessing He has for you. Sometimes the delay is not a denial, but a moment of preparation. It's in those times of waiting that God is building your character, strengthening your faith, and positioning you for the next season of your life. Think of a child waiting for a new toy or a dream coming true. The child may want the toy immediately, but the parents know it's better to wait until the child is mature enough to handle it responsibly. If the child received the toy before they were ready, it might be a burden rather than a blessing. The same is true for you. God is not withholding your blessing to frustrate you. He is waiting for you to reach the level of maturity, faith, and readiness to handle it. If you receive the blessing before you are ready, it might overwhelm you. But when God knows you're ready, when He knows you've developed the strength, wisdom, and patience to carry the weight of the blessing, He will release it to you. This is why it's so important to trust God's process, even when it feels like nothing is happening. You may feel like you're in a season of stagnation, but that's when God is working the most. He is shaping you, refining you, and teaching you the lessons you need to learn before He can take you to the next level. Waiting doesn't mean that God has forgotten you. It means that He's preparing you for something greater. His preparation is just as important as the promise itself, because without it, you wouldn't be able to fully appreciate or sustain the blessing when it arrives. God knows when you're ready because He is intimately involved in your life. He knows your heart, your desires, and your weaknesses. He knows what it will take to prepare you for the future He has planned for you. And in His love and wisdom, He is working behind the scenes to get you to that place. Trust that His timing is perfect and that He will not allow you to step into the promise until you are fully equipped to walk in it. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, remember that God is not forgetting you. He is preparing you, and He knows exactly when you are ready. Trust in His process and in His perfect timing, because when the right moment comes, everything will fall into place. Your breakthrough will come at the right time, and you will be ready to step into the fullness of God's promises for your life. When you find yourself in a season of no contact, whether it's with God, others, or a dream you've been holding on to, it can feel isolating and confusing. The silence may seem like abandonment, and the absence of answers or connections can leave you questioning what's next. But understand that this period of apparent separation is not the end. It is part of the divine making process. After the no contact, you will emerge stronger, more refined, and more prepared for the destiny that God has set before you. The feeling of being alone or disconnected from God, especially when you're in the midst of trials, is common. Many great leaders, prophets, and believers in history have experienced this. But just because there's no visible contact doesn't mean there's no divine work happening behind the scenes. In fact, it's during these silent, seemingly dormant seasons that God is often doing His most important work in your life. It's when you're not receiving immediate answers, when there's no constant affirmation that God is shaping your character, testing your faith, and refining your purpose. Think about a piece of raw clay. It is molded, shaped, and crafted by the hands of the potter. The clay doesn't speak or argue with the process, but it yields to the hands that are forming it. Similarly, during the no-contact seasons of life, God is shaping you in ways you can't see. He's smoothing out your rough edges, removing the things that don't align with your purpose, and preparing you to hold the blessings He has for you. Along Proverbs 17. This shaping process may feel uncomfortable at times, but is necessary for you to become the person who can handle the weight of the promise He has for you. The silence of no contact isn't a void. It's a space of growth and strengthening. It's a time for you to learn how to trust God more deeply, even when you don't hear His voice or see His movement. It's in these moments that your faith is tested and solidified. The strength you gain in this season is not just physical or emotional. It's spiritual. You learn to rely on God's character, His promises, and His faithfulness, even when the circumstances don't align with your expectations. This is a season where your roots are deepened, where your trust is grown, and where you learn to stand firm even when it feels like everything is uncertain. After the no contact, you emerge not just having survived the season, but having been transformed by it. You become stronger because you've learned to depend on God in new ways. You've learned that He is faithful even in the silence. Your perspective changes, and you realize that the struggles you've faced have refined you rather than defeated you. You are no longer the same person you were before this season. You are a more resilient, more determined, and more faithful version of yourself. In the end, the making process after no contact is not about what's been taken away, but about what's been added to you. It's the strength, the wisdom, and the spiritual maturity that you gain as a result of walking through that difficult silent season. When you emerge, you are ready for the next level, ready to receive what God has for you with a deeper understanding of His power, grace, and timing. You are stronger not because of what you went through, but because of how you allowed God to shape you in the process. So hold on during the silence, knowing that you will emerge stronger and more prepared for the blessings ahead. So let me speak to someone who feels like God has forgotten you, who feels like you've been abandoned in the silence. You are not forsaken. You are being tested, and after the test, He's about to make you. You're being processed, you're being refined, and you're being prepared for a level of breakthrough that's going to blow your mind. Stay faithful in the silence. Stay rooted in trust. And watch how God will elevate you after the test, after the no contact, and make you into the person you were destined to be. You coming out of this stronger than you've ever been before. Amen.